Cool.
Oh, not yet, bro.
Now.
And go.
Yes. All right.
All right, guys, welcome back to TBM Podcast. I'm your host, Gunnar Michelli. So today we have John Velez back on the pod. We have Captain Ryan Nicholson back on the pod. And we have a special guest, Chief Corley Moore. He's got a very big podcast in the fire industry. It's called The Weekly Scrap. And he is also the founder of Firefighter Vigilance. That's what it was?
Firehouse Vigilance.
Firehouse Vigilance. But I know him by the scrap. That's what I listen to. But so Chief Moore, tell us about you a little bit.
Not much to say. Firefighter, Moore, Oklahoma, suburbia, battalion chief of the Green Shift. Awesome guys. Firehouse Vigilance is my fight against complacency, my personal fight against complacency, which led to me starting the Weekly Scrap, which is a
awesome
podcast much like this, probably. And over time, I've got to talk to some of the most awesome people in the fire service. The luckiest person in the fire service. So
you definitely made like a profound and positive impact across our culture, and it's really displaying itself. I mean, people are eager, and now people that used to not be motivated, we're seeing that they are much so. Or at least hearing the stories about them, like they was, I guess, in a complacent way in their career, and then this culture in Longview is just phenomenal right now.
that's awesome.
It's
to hear,
phenomenal.
Man. I love hearing the stories of people who listen to the scrap, get fired up because the guests and their phenomenal stories and what they share and their passion. It keeps me fired up.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we just have to keep that momentum going.
Absolutely.
But so growing up, you play sports and stuff like that?
Yeah, love football. Football was my life as a kid, man.
Really?
From Little League all the way up through high school.
Did you play college ball?
No.
No. So what position did you play? Did you
Running back, cornerback.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Get down.
I was a little skinny kid back in the day.
What did you play?
Can't relate it. Offensive guard.
I know you got slammed.
220 all day. I did get slammed a lot, actually.
And we have a professional soccer player over there. Play with Clem Dempsey. And you went pretty far in it. So, guys, I'm going to be on my phone a lot. So I'm just referencing our questions because these are very thought out questions. We spent a whole day trying to do this. But so as like in your career, have you always wanted to be like a fireman? Like as a kid, like what's kind of the inspiration of you getting into this realm?
No. I always thought it was cool whenever the fire truck would drive by. I thought that's cool. And you'd be in the backseat of the car and look up at the firefighters who were sitting there backwards with their mustaches, covered in soot. And you'd be like, that's cool. Always was cool, but it was never something I was going to be. And I kind of stumbled into it when I was very young. Just being a young, dumb kid, football had ended. I broke my tib fib. Football was done. I wasn't really cut out for college, like studying.
Yeah.
And I was working a job. I think I made $6.75 an hour at the time. And mic check. Good. And my dad actually called me and said, "Hey, Moore Fire Department's hiring. Why don't you try out for them?" And I was like, "Okay." And then, lucky enough, I got hired that time.
Were you from Moore?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, Velez?
Did, looking back, because I kind of feel like I was the same way. I never really wanted to be a fireman, if you will, but I always thought the job was cool and stuff like that. Looking back, though, I can kind of see in my past where I had like little influences, right? That I never really took notice to.
Right.
I had some family members in the fire service. I had an uncle who retired from Dallas Fire, cousin that works in the fire service, and like looking back, I could see how I was somewhat influenced, but didn't like realize it at the time. Is that something that like you could look back and say, or is it just strictly from thinking it was cool?
Man, probably the most profound thing was when I broke my tib fib on that football field, and the medics actually that came out there and helped me. There was an old grizzled firefighter who. I remember them tapping that needle. He said, "Hey, kid, are you tough? 'Cause we're about to find out." Right? And it was something I'm sure he said to like dozens of broken-limbed kids over the years, but it stuck with me. And that was probably the point where I was like, after the fact, I was like, that's probably had a big, profound impact on me wanting to do something like that.
Sure.
From the first time I hired on all the way for probably the first 10 years, I loved going to fires. I love fighting fire. I mean, there's not a cooler job in the world, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it's great, man. But I didn't appreciate the job. You know what I'm saying? It was something you went and did and got to kick ass, kick indoors, and spray water, and it was just awesome. But I didn't appreciate it. I wasn't a student of it. I wasn't plugged into it. I just loved doing it. And there's a lot of people that way. But I think when I promoted to company officer was really the big change. And that was when it was like all of a sudden, and I talk about it in the class tomorrow. It was the reason I was like, holy crap, I'm the guy who now makes the call of whether we crawl in under that smoke, whether we bail into that window. It's on me.
Was it just like like an event change that? Like I guess you're more not wanting to be complacent and taking the job seriously, or was it just something that you was just like a flick of a switch?
Well, I've always been utterly fascinated by what makes people tick. So I do. I like me and Chris were talking about it at dinner. I'd be like, man, I just did this. This one guy got pissed off about it, and this other guy like got inspired by it. What's the difference between? And I always wanted to know the difference in that. So that played into it, but really I was now in charge of a house, and I got to control the culture of that house, and I wanted to be badass. That's the truth of it. I wanted to be the best crew on the Moore Fire Department. Now, how do you do that? And that got into the psychological stuff. But you have to understand there's something about my department, and I'm not picking on my department. Please do not take this wrong.
No.
But there was a time when the culture of the place was whoever could do the least amount in a day, in a shift, won.
Yeah.
If you could get to the recliners as fast as possible, do as little as possible, you were the winners. And for your career, the goal was to get to the slowest station. And if you got to the slowest station, you won.
Yeah.
Right? And that was what really, growing up in that culture and saying, wait a second, this isn't the way it should be. Like, and so the combination of wanting to be the best, and then with my young guys that I had at the time saying, well, what does it mean to be the best? And then they actually defined the complacency aspect of it.
So let's hit on that real quick.
Yeah.
Go.
What advice would you give a department that is has a crippled culture due to bad leadership or cancerous attitudes? Because that's got to be a common theme that you see as you travel.
It's the number one question probably between that and what do I do if I'm in that and I want to be awesome.
Right.
Nobody has to give you permission to be a badass. If you're waiting on your chief, if you're waiting on your captain, if you're waiting on your senior guy to tell you, hey, it's okay now to go out there and be awesome, you're waiting on the wrong things. So if you want to change the culture of a crippling, toxic atmosphere in your department, it starts one place each and every time, and that's the mirror. Period.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because people are, they conform to their own habitat, and it can be in a place, because I experienced this in the Marines. Like, there was a group of people that felt like just being rejective of the job and just not wanting to be like lazy, more or less. That was a cool thing to do, and they kind of flocked to that. But then once you have one person that's motivated and it takes something seriously, they radiate that passion. They radiate just being motivated, and that's, I guess, essentially what we're looking for, or what everyone would want to look for. And I think if they look in the mirror and just like reflect like why they're doing it, and like just really think of why they're doing anything that they do, like intentionally, just want to make a positive impact. And that's like kind of my thing as I went to the Marines. Like anything I did, I just wanted to make sure I left a positive impact and a good legacy behind, because I felt like I owed it to the people that come under me. I felt like I owed it to the people that came way before me. And so I'll just always hold that pretty dear to my heart.
I think especially like Captain Nicholson was saying, like, how do we create change? And it goes back to like the old, I'm pretty sure it's old, I don't know, but how does a man move a mountain, right? He starts one rock at a time. So if we can infect one person with that positive attitude, right? And we've all seen it, I'm sure, at some level. That one person goes to one other person, and then before long it's an entire crew. And then before long it's an entire battalion, and then it's the entire department, right? Just one person at a time. And I think that's probably the best route to go, especially just being influential people. So,
And I'll say, I don't want to step on anybody, but if, and I always bring this up because it's so often you'll have one person fired up in a toxic environment, and it's real easy, and I compare it to the fire triangle. You need oxygen for the fire to burn, for the passion to burn, you need oxygen. And if you're stuck in a department where there is no oxygen, and I say oxygen or other people that are like-minded, then get outside of your department. I'm not saying leave your department, but get outside of your fire. Find the fools, find a conference, find like-minded individuals, and get that oxygen that can let your passion burn.
Absolutely.
Like, get connected to it, because otherwise you will smolder out, and you'll be a burnt out.
And it just sucks that people always wait for something bad to happen before they take something seriously or become motivated. And I think we should be more what's that Bill used to say? Reactive.
Yeah.
But you want to be more.
You want to be proactive rather than
Proactive, yeah.
reactive to a certain situation, for sure.
And in the fire service, we're really good at being reactive. We always react well after a suicide, line of duty death, some sort of tragedy.
Right. I kind of compare it like, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it because we run EMS here, right? So I always compare it to running a medical call. I know. And, right, like, we're always reactive when it comes to medical calls. You come in like, I have no idea what that was, and the doctor's like, oh, it was this or whatever. So you walk back to the truck, and you're immediately searching like what this was, right? So something that I've personally tried to create, and I know that there's other guys that think this way, is to have the knowledge base on the fire side of things, to that way, whenever we see something on the fire ground, we can actually react to it, like right then and there. Like, hey, I've learned this, I've studied this, and I know this. Now I'm experiencing it, and I'll truly understand it. I went to Nozzle Ford not too long ago, and Aaron Field said, you can learn something, but until you experience it, you don't truly understand it. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of trying to eliminate the whole, well, I'm going to experience it, then go back and learn it, and now I'll understand it, that whole aspect of it.
So you got a guy that's gung-ho, he's after it, he's wanting to build that culture. What is the single most important intentional action a guy can take to start building that culture?
Single most important action?
Intentional action, yeah.
Man, 100%, and I'll preach this till the day I die, until I figure out something smarter, is to go look in the mirror. 100%, it starts there, in the mirror. If you want to make a change in your department, you got to change yourself. And because that's what you control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer of that, because, I mean, it's all what you make it. But if you're very, like, we're all like type A personalities and stuff, and, we tend to want to take a leadership role. And the people that are normally like negative and stuff, a lot of times those guys are doing that just because, like I said, is that it's the cool thing to do. And I just think if you take that initiative and just want to be good and stay motivated and anything, even like, I know, like, I always kind of fault myself as, because I am a rookie. There's nothing about that, but I feel like there's lines I shouldn't cross, is like talking to the new guys and stuff. But then, had a talk with Cap. He's like, no, don't feel that way. Go and, do something about it if they're messing up, whatever. And so I started kind of reaching out that way. But, yeah.
Kind of like what Gunner's talking about, and you mentioned it, like, you're in that toxic culture, if you will. And whether it be on a crew basis or an entire department basis, you mentioned like getting out, and I haven't been to a ton of classes, but I totally feel what you're saying. Being around those like-minded individuals, and it kind of brings up a good point, and it was something that I learned like really once I came here, and that was like the mentorship side of things, right? If you're in that environment where you just can't find a mentor like in your department, it's always good to have that person outside of your department for a different perspective. So what do you think is so important about mentorship in the fire service?
Because of our lack of codified and stratified, every department, let me try to put this in the right words, every department is its own microcosm. Now, the internet has shrunk that quite a bit, but every department is its own microcosm, and there is not, despite IFSTA and despite IFSAC and despite things that have tried to set a standard, there is not a standard for education for leadership.
Absolutely.
So the only way that the fire service has been able to pass on leadership is through informal mentoring.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that is why it is the way we have done it since the inception of the fire service. Is you learn from the grizzled officer before you. Mm-hmm. Either you learned what not to do from a crappy officer, which is the lessons that really stick hard, and if you're lucky, you get somebody who's taught you and set you up for success.
Absolutely. I know I've talked to Captain Nicholson a bunch. I'm a super black and white person, and it's very hard to be black and white in such a dynamic environment that we have here. And so learning from all of those people, getting those mentors, to get every viewpoint of a certain situation, that way, for me personally, like, I can calculate like the right choice to make in a certain situation. I like that a lot.
So who have been some of your mentors in the service?
Oh, man. Before the scrap, I mean, in my own personal experience in the department, Chief Terry Scott, he was a 37-year firefighter at the Moore Fire Department. He was a battalion chief for the last 18 of it, I believe. Wow. And he was the battalion chief of Red Shift when I came on. That's all I ever knew him as, until he retired in like 2016 or so. And huge mentor. In fact, he's the one who told me, I was filming his retirement video, which is something I did when people retired. And I always do a thing where I'm like, would you like to say anything to the guys that you're not going to be able to say on the day of your retirement?
Yeah.
You know, so they record it. And he said, the hardest fight, Corley, the hardest fight you will ever fight is the fight against complacency. And that quote was one of the reasons, that's the byline of the Weekly Scrap. The other person is Chief Scott Lance, which is one of the people my son is named after. And he was also, he spent 36 or 37 years at the Moore Fire Department. And he was a driver, lieutenant. He spent his last 2 years as battalion chief. I actually took his spot when he retired as battalion chief. But he's a huge mentor. When he was a driver, I was his firefighter. When he promoted to company officer, I was his driver. When he became battalion chief, I became his company officer. So we were connected at the hip for
So you intentionally named your son after him?
him. And my son's name is Jack Scott. It's not 2 words, it's 1 word, Jack Scott. And he's named after Chief Jack Briggs and Chief Scott Lance.
That's wild.
So there's a long story behind it, but it's true. He's named after those 2 people. It might have started as a joke. It ended up being very real.
So did you seek them out as mentors, or did they seek you out as a mentee?
I think it was organic more than anything.
Yeah.
I don't know why Scott took an interest in me when I was young and dumb and young and dumb. But he did.
If you were in like a position like Gunner and myself, we're still relatively new in the grand scheme of things, and you're trying to seek that mentor. Like some of the mentors that you see, especially like you said, the internet's kind of shrunk things. Some of these guys are pretty big names, if you will, on social media.
Absolutely.
Is it something that you just like got to get over your ego and just reach out to them? And like, is it as simple as, hey, will you be my mentor? Or is it just something that you start forming like, hey, I have a question if you don't mind answering?
I almost think mentor is too strong of a word. I think it's just relationships.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, you have to form a relationship, and that just takes time. And something that a lot of people do not have is time.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's the biggest part but if you can make a connection with them and form a relationship, then absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't think it's as simple. I don't think it's as simple as saying, "Will you be my mentor?"
Sure.
Yeah.
Because again, I think informal mentorship is the bedrock of it, and that comes organically from being in a relationship.
Right.
And when I say relationship, it doesn't mean friendship, and I have to explain that to a lot of people when I talk about leadership and relationship. But it does mean a relationship. And then there's formal mentoring, which you get with Scott Thompson in the Colony, and he really gets into like a formal mentorship, and that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah, it for sure is. So I kind of want to circle back to something. We already kind of jumped ahead a little bit to standards. And like I said, I'm a pretty black and white person when it comes down to it. And so I struggle with the standard because like you said, I kind of make the comparison is we don't have a Michael Jordan in the fire service. And if we did, the closest person would be Andy Fredericks, right? I mean, in my opinion, sorry.
No, I'm like
it would be, right? So how can we set that standard, right? Like how can we collectively, and probably people way better than myself, way smarter than myself, say this is what is expected of you. This is the standard that we're shooting for, both performance-wise and really like attitude. I didn't know if you had like any ideas of how we can just like put something forward to try and make that change.
Man, I think if you get the answer to that question, then that is a bestseller.
Yeah.
Like 100%. I mean that from the bottom. It's not a sarcastic answer. I mean that. You get the answer to that question because motivation is intrinsic. It comes from within. You cannot order someone to be motivated. Plain and simple.
Yep.
You can order them to work out. You cannot order them to give a shit about working out. And that's really what we're talking about.
Right.
You want them to give a crap. But you can't order that. So then what are you going to do? And that's really what it comes down to. And that's the reason I wrote the 9 L's was it's because if we're not going to fire this person, then what can we do to get them on board? Because if they're not on board, then we cannot have high performance.
Was there someone specifically like you was kind of targeting with 9 L's, or was it something?
No, it's a conglomeration of all the podcast interviews and discussions like this, informal discussions around fire pits and hotel lobbies. Lots of late nights in the day room with the TV off and just talking. Days at the bay on the tailboard, picnic table out back. It's just this whole conglomeration of life.
So for me, when I get new guys, a lot of times they'll come to me and ask me, hey, what is the one trait as a rookie that you want to see? And that's always my answer is motivation. Motivation to get out and train, motivation to learn, motivation to just be inspired. Because I can teach you skills. Yes. I can teach you strategy. I can teach you tactics. I can teach you all that crap. But what I can't teach you is what's in your heart.
Right.
And so I'm 100% with you on that.
moving on to the next. Let's roll into some leadership stuff.
Okay, I'm easy.
Yeah.
This is your guys' show. I'm having fun.
And this is, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. So we're talking about quality and traits as a leader. You know, and there's so many different aspects of different leadership and styles and stuff. But as far as like a mindset behind it, you know, as you're like leading your men, do you lead them as in like more like the job? Like do you keep everything specific to that, or do you kind of lead them just to be good men? You lead them to be like good fathers, and like does that dive into your like kind of leadership
Dude,
style?
you're in my wheelhouse now, so I can spend like 4 hours talking about the question you're asking, but I'll try to be like this is what I study. This is what I really deep dive into. And I go back to, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record throughout all this because it really is, it's relationships. And by that I don't mean friendships. And I don't care what level of leader you are at. No one cares what you want as a leader until, and it's like that. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So real quick,
Yeah.
I wrote that on our board this morning up at the station. Yeah, that's exactly.
But 100%. I told one of my guys was talking about promoting to a battalion chief, and he was like, "Man, I'm not sure I want to take over that shift. You know, there's all these problems and all this stuff." He goes, "Where would I start?" We were talking. I was like, "They do." He goes, I want them to care about this because I care about it." And I'm like, no one cares about what you want, right? Until you form those relationships with them. And so many people get that out of whack. And again, relationship doesn't mean you don't have to be their friend. That's not what I mean when I say relationship. They have to trust that you have their best interest at heart when you make a decision. They have to trust that when you come to them and talk to them, it is to make them better. It is to take care of them. It is to protect them. And unless you have that relationship, then that cannot occur.
No, I agree.
They have to know that you genuinely care for them.
That's it.
As a person.
If you melt it down to one sentence, that's it.
So like, and this is what, you know, my military background, like, so a little bit about me. I was in the Marine Corps. I was 0311 rifleman, and, you know, I was in 29 Palms, did 2 tours to Afghanistan. But like young and immature, you know, when I first stepped in leadership roles, I was always the hard guy. Like I wanted them to be good, and like my intentions were good, but I just wasn't going about it the right way. You know, I was hard on them. You know, I didn't treat them nice, and I started noticing that they were getting into problems. But they wouldn't approach me with them. I'd hear it in a roundabout way.
Sure.
And so, you know, I sat down with some of my staff sergeants and leaders, and I started getting classes and stuff. Then I started requesting to go to classes and whatnot to get some more education on it. But one of my staff sergeants told me, and he's like, leadership is founded off of love. And I say this pretty much in almost every podcast probably, but like if you solely base it off love, like you'll do anything for them, you'll do anything for them, and they'll do anything for you. And it kind of bleeds over into like the brotherhood stuff and everything. And I think, you know, it's kind of weird for us to be so masculine firemen and stuff like that, to be able to say something like that, but it's 100% true.
Yes.
You know, because especially like I think took my first leadership role, I was probably 19, a team leader. And in Afghanistan, you know, then I guess I picked up sergeant, blah, blah, blah. I was probably 20 and went to Afghanistan again. But now, like, I had 4 men. Now I have in charge of 20 men and leading them on combat patrols and stuff like that. And I changed my leadership style, but I started noticing, like, how much my guys actually outputted for me. Just because, you know, like, I was trying to make sure they were good beyond the Marine Corps, is beyond the job. And it worked really well because they text me all the time, you know, checking on me and stuff like that. And I do the same for them because when you're in leadership, you know, you're not just building like your team or whatever, like you're building a family. And it's something that's everlasting because if you're a good leader to somebody, they will always remember you, because I remember mine, you know. And I just hold that pretty cherishable.
I think it's the love part's important, right? Because what is it? I think it's Leaders Eat Last, that book. The first chapter is empathy. It's all about empathy, loving your people, stuff like that.
And that's something I didn't have at that time, you know, like, because my leadership, my small team leadership was not very good leadership, to be honest, because they just worried about hazing us and stuff like that, you know, just making sure. I'm sure intentions were good, but I did not like them. You know, I would do anything for them, but like as far as being able to talk to them, like if I had a personal problem, I have something going on at home, I couldn't go to them because I'm sure they would care then, but they're so, like, I guess, rejecting of you that you just feel like you wouldn't care.
There's a fine line between coddling and saying, I'm going to take care of you no matter what. You know, I'm taking care of my guys, and
Yeah.
nothing can hurt them, you know. And looking out for your people and saying, no, I'm going to make sure you're good at your job.
Yeah.
Which is a different kind of taking care of your people. But if you get one without the other, if you get just the, I'm going to make sure you're good at your job without letting you know that you care, then it gets too hard. And when I say hard, the edges get too sharp.
Yeah.
And if you go the other direction and you're like, hey, I'm going to take care of you no matter what, nothing's going to touch you, and then it gets too soft. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
so it's a dichotomy of, I'm taking care of you, but I'm taking care of you by making sure you know what you're doing.
Exactly.
And I'm taking care of you by making sure you're good at what you do and you're competent so you can be confident.
Exactly. And by doing that is leading from the front. You're training with them. You're training them in the same level that they're training in. And that way, you know, like they feel like, you know, you're going through the suck, I'm going through the suck. It's all, you know, fair.
Yep.
And they cherish that. Because, I mean, I just remember, you know, we'd be standing posts and patrolling and stuff for hours. You know, throughout the day, we only have a little bit of sleep, but we needed to fill sandbags. I made sure, like, I was filling sandbags more than anybody, you know, just be able to show them that, you know, it's
Absolutely.
something we had to do, and I just wasn't trying to screw with them, you know. But, and I can't say that for everyone. There's, you know, I had leaders that let their guys go out there and do that, knowing they're not going to get no sleep, and it's relax. But leading from the front's very important.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
So, like, no doubt, leadership's tough, right? It's hard to stay consistent. It's hard to, show those guys, like, pour all of your love, you know, if you will, into those guys. What do you think, like, the biggest challenge that leaders face today?
Man, again, I'm a broken record because the biggest challenge leaders face is the mirror.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you got to have humility. You have to get in the mirror and say, what am I doing to cause this problem to be worse? Right? Not what did I do to cause this problem? It's not just like everything's my fault. It's not that kind of extreme ownership, not to pick on Jocko's title, because I'm a huge fan of Jocko. But it is, you have to identify, what am I doing to make this problem worse? And you cannot do that without humility. And if you have the humility to identify it and you take care of it, I promise you the problem will get better.
Absolutely.
You know, it's something that, you know, Cap did with us, and you talked about it, is, you know, like, he was always told, I guess, what, you can't be friends, or you couldn't be close, or what was that?
Yeah. What's that book? God, what is that?
Buddy to boss type
Yeah.
deal? Yeah.
I didn't agree with that,
Right.
but it was kind of a mandatory read, and I was
Right.
like, I'm done. I read one chapter, and I'm like, I don't agree. I feel like being their buddy, well, not really, showing them
Yeah.
that I care for them in that way. Now these guys don't want to disappoint me,
Right.
and that's where it should get.
That's
to
where it gets
is-
powerful.
Oh, yeah, it
That's
does.
where it gets really
Yes.
powerful.
It does.
When I get them into the office and we have to discipline or whatever,
Yeah.
I ask them how they're doing. I'm sad because I disappointed you.
Yeah.
I don't care about the write up and whatever, or if I messed up. I'm pissed off because I upset you, and that's powerful
hurts.
as a leader.
What's really cool is when you can give discipline. When you have to bring someone in formally or informally to give them a, hey, this behavior has to change, and your relationship gets stronger because of it.
Yeah.
That's when it's.
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah.
you know you've gotten there.
But you can't do that with everybody, because, I mean, there's people out there, I mean, they do no wrong, and if you give them a little bit of slack, they're going to take a mile, you know. And so you just kind of got to assess, you know, who you do that with and stuff, and because, I mean, yeah, man, I had a guy, I did that, and so like I not doing stuff. Well, I had to go to discipline him. Then he like started talking to me, and you know, like went downhill quick, and I had to stop doing that with him. And then he showed that, but I still did it with my other guys. But he felt so left out, and then he came back later on, you know, several months after, and apologized for everything because, you know, he said, like, I took advantage of you. And
But one of my theories, and I say theories because it's not fact, but is that in the buddy to boss thing, and I talk about it in the class, but is that who gets to determine what level it is? Like, you can absolutely be someone's friend and their leader, but the person who is subordinate, the person below, is the person who determines what the level is. Because if they
I
can,
agree.
if they can have respect and they can understand there's a time you have to make decisions and discipline and things like that, then you can be friends all day long.
Yeah.
But if they ever expect anything to change because of the friendship, boom, it's over. You have to be a leader, or you have to abdicate your authority, in which case you're ineffective.
yeah, absolutely.
That's
I mean,
what I tell these guys. Don't put me in that position.
Yes, don't make
Do
me
not
be a
put me in that
captain.
position
Yeah.
because every time I'm going to have to be your boss.
Yes.
Yeah.
and that's why it's so important for us to be just self-accountable, you know. I mean, so like that, before if I mess up, you know, which I do, we all do, but like, you know, I apologize to Cap and whatever, and I admit to my mistakes. You have to own it. I mean,
and by building these relationships with these guys, my subordinates, whatever you want to call them, by building these relationships, now they know when I'm no longer being their buddy and I'm now a boss. They know, they know automatically, and I don't have to say anything. And now they're like, oh, okay, we're boss mode here. Yes, sir.
No, because it's a relationship.
Exactly.
And
And that's only built by building that relationship.
Dude, 1,000%.
It's all about like having those hard conversations, right? And that's something that
Let's
we
talk
kind of
about
wanted
that.
to hit on pretty hard. And I know we've all had this conversation, how important it is for us to have the hard conversations, but not only just down the chain of command, because that's typically seems to where those hard conversations happen, right? It's a driver getting on to, not necessarily getting on to, but you know, talking with a firefighter. It's a captain talking to a firefighter, but also up that chain of command. So do you think it's important to have those difficult conversations? And if someone's having trouble like approaching those conversations, is there any advice that you would give about like how to handle them?
No, 100%. One, read the book, Crucial Confrontations. Amazing book. I talk about it tomorrow.
Got it in my locker.
It's an amazing book for that reason. Lots of good, actual, actionable actions you can take. You know what I'm saying? Not just theory. But no, peel back the layers and say, why is the conversation difficult in the first place?
Yeah.
And that's really what you have to identify is why is it difficult? And it's difficult normally because what we've been talking about here for quite some time, the relationship isn't in place. If there is a relationship in place, there's hardly any conversation that is difficult. But if there's no relationship in place, then minor things like, holy shit, you left another plate in the sink, that can turn into a massive point of contention.
Absolutely.
But and so you can't get the cart before the horse. If you do the principles and build the relationships, again, not friendships, it's not coddling, but relationships, then difficult conversations almost evaporate.
Right. And I've read like 4 books in the past like 30 days, so I apologize
Congrats.
if this wasn't
Congrats.
your book, but it was a part of your book, I think, where
There's nothing original in my book because it came from a whole bunch of other
sure,
books. So
there you go. You said something about like whenever it's time to have those conversations, I guess, is kind of what it's alluding to. We oftentimes make up stories to why that person.
that's out of Crucial.
Right.
Yeah.
We make up those.
Point at you 'cause you have me on locker.
We make up those. Odd stories of why this person's doing that, and get into their motives, and something.
We
like
can make
that.
up entire like Machiavellian like dramas.
When I read that, my mind was like, it circled back to so many different, just little like nuances that I'm like, I've worked up this big thing, in my head, and when it boiled down to it, it was something that was so small.
And the
small.
longer you wait to have that conversation, the worse it gets.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that the guys that I'm around that are plugged in and to it, they're not scared to hold each other accountable, whether that be a firefighter to a captain or a firefighter to another firefighter. And my crew specifically, I think we're really good at that and holding each other accountable, whether that be on the training side of things or like attitude, right? And I'm probably the worst about it sometimes. Often being a new guy, I do get stuck on the medic a little bit, and sometimes my attitude could probably use a little bit of improvement.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And my guys, they'll call me out about it, right? And if I need a little break to get away, like that, tell me like, we don't want to talk to you for 30 minutes or whatever. Like,
we're
whatever.
professionals. They
Right.
call each other out.
It's
Professionals
just,
calling each other out.
and it's good though, because I do go take that mental breather, come back, feel super refreshed, and be able to turn that day around. So,
But let me ask you, John, how strong is your relationship in that crew with those people?
for my crew, I can speak personally that we're very, very
You say like
strong.
8, 9, 10 out of 10 type
Absolutely.
deal. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's just natural when you have those kind of relationships.
Yeah.
Accountability is just bred in that environment. That is the key to high performance, man. That's why you belong. That's why you are on a high performance crew because the relationships are there.
Yeah, and I think like it makes sense now that we're sitting here talking about it. Things are firing in my head. I think that's probably what makes it so hard for like people of mine and Gunner's tenure to have those difficult conversations with those rookies, because we haven't built that relationship yet to be able to have that conversation.
And like, I feel like, how could I be? I'm a rookie too. Like, to me, it's just, I don't know. It's just a dynamic where I feel like I don't have a say, because
Hey,
I don't know.
let's ask Chief that question that you asked me at the breakfast the other day.
Oh, you're gonna have to remind me. I ask you a lot of questions.
When are you no longer a rookie?
Oh yeah.
That's such a
Yeah.
that's deep and
I
philosophical.
know. It got deep.
Man, technically, you're no longer a rookie at the Moore Fire Department. Sorry, you're no longer a rookie at the Moore Fire Department when you reach the end of your probationary year. So on the technical side of things and strictly literally speaking, that would be the end of it. But your mindset has to be, and again, it goes back to humility. Your mindset has to be never ending. Like student of the game is what was it? Yeah.
I love
Eternal student.
you shared it today with Snow. He's standing back there. His scrap coming up.
Yeah.
Like, forever student.
That
or
was it.
whatever.
That was the word I was looking for.
I
Forever
loved-
student.
I loved it.
I was looking for help, Chris.
I loved it.
So
I was like eternal. No, that's not the word.
my Staff Sergeant used to say, "You'll always be a boot to somebody."
Yeah.
And a boot rookies, the same stuff. And that's what was my answer. But Cab, you had a pretty good one as far as like.
Yeah, I mean, like these guys, what, 2 years on? Less than
Roughly.
five, both less than 5.
Yeah.
But you got more time on than the guys that came 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So when guys start approaching you for advice and for help, I think that's a good indication in your mind that maybe I'm no longer that rookie, man. Now I'm being asked to pass on the advice. And
I'm moving to the
information they gave me.
journeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
That's what it is.
No, it's no, and that's again, we don't have that codified stratification. We have ranks, but ranks are not really based on competence.
No.
Right.
I mean,
No.
I think
we all shake our heads and laugh.
like I
Yeah.
think it's like something Captain Nicholson brought up the other day. He was asked like, "Do you think there's such thing as a bad leader?" And I might let you. I don't want to steal your lightning, but like your response was good.
My personal opinion: when you're christened the leader, those bars on your collar don't make you a leader, right? I don't think we all know that. But when you're a leader, you're inherently good at leading people, right? When you're bad at leading people, you're not a leader. It's an oxymoron. You're not a leader. You're just a boss or a supervisor.
Yes.
So
I love it. I love it.
inherently, leader is good
Yes.
at what they do,
Yeah.
leading people.
Von
There's
Oppen,
no
yeah.
bad leader.
Von Oppen says, "Can we please quit using the word to describe what's bad at the good word?"
Oh,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And he's like, "Don't say bad leadership. There's just leadership." And I love, it was the essence of
pretty
what
much
you're
is
saying.
that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
So no doubt, like you have to stay motivated to be a leader. What do you think is important for leaders, like where their motivations come from? If that question makes sense. When I said it out loud, it didn't sound like it did. Like, where do you think, as a leader, our motives should come from? Does that make it better?
What motivates your leadership?
Sure.
It's got to be. Sorry, I'm not
No,
going to
go.
answer it.
Go.
Ask the
It's
question.
got to be your love and your care for your guys.
Okay.
That absolutely has to motivate your leadership, in my opinion. Sorry.
So-
This is your show. I'm sorry.
I'm listening. I'm learning with everybody, 100%. I think that I don't necessarily care where it comes from, so long as the result is you care for your guys. And so, but I do think that generally speaking, that's going to be it.
Right.
I don't know that many people are like, man, if I get this promotion, it's 15,000 more a year, but I care for my guys. So I think it's baked into the cake almost.
Yeah,
that
sure.
And that's such a huge epidemic. People promoting for, money and
money,
stuff
prestige,
like that.
power,
It
yeah,
drives me
respect.
crazy.
They're going to respect me now.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. But sorry, I cut you off.
No.
So let's go. I got
Everybody, we're trying to
I got to
out-nice
rethink my
each other
question.
on
Yeah,
the
no,
microphone.
it's okay. When it comes to like motivation, like how you personally as a leader, how do you stay motivated to be able to lead efficiently?
Man, it's selfish almost, that in the fact of, and I believe this with all my heart and soul, like I've been told so many times by people above me, Corley, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that in the day. I don't have time to do that. I don't have time. And I realized over time, I've realized you either invest the time in your people on the front end, right? At which case, if you do it, then you get to reap all these rewards. These rewards where they look out for you, they on their own go out and figure out your likes and dislikes, what makes you happy, what disappoints you. They figure it out on their own, and they try to do it on their own. When you invest the time up front, right? And it takes a lot of time and investment. Do not get me wrong. It's a grueling investment. But if you do it, you reap these rewards of high performance and them wanting to be awesome and the ability to have expectations and accountability without even flexing. But if you don't spend the time, then you get the inverse. And you end up spending even more time dealing with the fallout, the spin out, and the problems from the lack of investment in them to begin with.
Sure.
So for me, the motivation is, and I've seen it, like at every level since company officer, at every level where I started applying this on purpose, the benefits are just so awesome to experience that I would never, like, anytime I feel like I'm slipping, like, man, I need to go have dinner with my guys at these substations. I try to do it every tour, dinner at a different sub. And sometimes it's a pain in the ass, but
Yeah.
I can tell the difference between the connection. And
Yeah.
I've seen I've been a part of cultures. I've been a part of substations or subcultures and microcultures and macrocultures where that's not the case. And the lack of problems is my motivation.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm trying to articulate it better, but it's really selfishly, the smoothness is just so awesome.
You want to keep it going.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want it.
The benefits, I'm trying to make a good analogy, but man, it's just so smooth.
Yeah.
When you do it.
Yeah.
If you don't, then get ready to deal with problems.
So when it comes to motivation and keeping you, and I don't know if I should use the word motivated, mostly just because, like I said, I learned this from a book, but they're talking about motivation versus inspiration, right? Do you try to get to a point where you're motivating your crews, or is it more of you want to inspire them by your actions?
Motivation is 100% intrinsic. It comes from within. Like I cannot motivate Captain Nicholson.
Right.
100%. But he can motivate himself because he wants me to be happy. He will motivate himself if it's not, and that's the thing, it's not manipulation. It's not, he doesn't even do it to make me happy. You read Leaders Eat Last, you read Simon Sinek, so you understand the tribe mentality. You want to belong to that tribe.
Absolutely. You
feel like there's the endorphins, the oxytocin, the serotonin, all the good cocktails cook off from the connections we form. And you do it subconsciously because it feels good.
Yeah.
And so when you set up the conditions, you're setting people up to be excellent. You're setting people up to be awesome. And people want to be awesome. That's ultimately, at the end of the day, people really do. But then they're allowed, and I'll use Scott Thompson's term, they're allowed to drift towards failure. And the exact inverse is true. The bad cocktails exist, man. The cortisol cocktail is real. We cannot tell the difference between being in the jungle, stalked by a saber-toothed tiger, our bodies physiologically, and living in a toxic firehouse and feeling unsafe. Our bodies react the same way. And so, but if you can create that safety, they're motivated to have more of it.
Yeah. And so did you implement that with your kids as well? The same kind of like leadership?
I had kids very
traits?
young, and I didn't figure out a lot of this till later. So
I got you.
I
But a lot of times there's stuff that comes down from above us.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
policies, there's SOPs that come down that your crew isn't happy about. Right. So how do you keep them motivated through those obstacles? Because it's above you.
Above you.
It's stuff
And
that
you have
has
no-
to happen.
Complaints go up.
Exactly.
Right? And your people are absolutely allowed. Everybody on my shift can come in there and unload everything they got and how pissed they are about the latest dumbass policy that just got released. And they're allowed to do that, right? And I listen to them and I say, hey, here's the deal. I'm going to take your policy. I'm going to take your complaint and I'm going to take it up the chain. That is what I'm going to do for you. I cannot promise, and this is one of my favorite quotes, or my thing I tell them all the time, I cannot promise you results, but I can only promise you effort. And I'm going to take it up the chain and I'm going to give effort. And the thing is, you have to do it. You have to take those steps. Now, I get into a whole deep deal on message, effort, results, and this whole concept behind it. And again, it's another 4 hours deep diving rabbit holes. But you have to take every opportunity you can to send the message to them that you're taking care of them, that you're taking care of their complaints, their problems. You cannot, now, and this is a very hard lesson, and again, it's like a 30-minute part of the class tomorrow. You cannot take your complaints and complain to your people. And I've done it, and I have turned a station into one of the most toxic places you could work at the Moore Fire Department. Complaints, and I mean, I would complain to the guys down, and that's a hard lesson to learn. In fact, I did it to Scott Lance, he was my captain, I was his driver, and I would complain to the guys all the time about him. And by doing that, he had no clue why everything was a shit show in his house, because I wasn't telling him all their complaints. I was just complaining with them. And I was not setting him up in fact, I was setting him up for failure, honestly.
Yeah.
So, to your point, People who are in charge will absolutely make asses of themselves, and you have to take the complaints about that to them. And if you have relationships with them, you can do so and it can be healthy. If you don't have relationships with them, then it will probably be ineffective. But you have to put in the effort. You have to let your people know you're putting in the effort. Most importantly, sometimes you'll take the complaints up. I'll take it to the chief and say, hey, this. And he explains something to me that I didn't understand before. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. You have to take that back to your people and say, hey, guys, this is why.
They understand.
And those are the parts that are oftentimes missing. And when those are missing, boom, you're talking about Firehouse kitchen table can get.
Oh, yeah. My company commander always said that. Like, we always deserve a why.
Yes.
You know. You might not get the why now. You might not get it tomorrow, but eventually you're going to get the why. And that was pretty cool because that's something that always stood with me.
But the problem is you got a chief that's giving the why to 6 different battalion chiefs now. And now they're going out giving it to 15 different officers. So it gets that message gets construed. C shift heard something different than A shift.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. I think I think it's Craig Groeschel in his podcast. He explains the importance of the why, and I had to pull up my notes because it's so good. It says it disarms the critics, it empowers advocates, and it educates the bystanders.
Absolutely.
So if we can explain the why to a lot of things, it makes everything just work more smoothly.
Yeah. Love Pastor Craig. And the other thing about the why, and I'll say this real quick because I want to be very, very clear. There is a time for the why, and there's a time to do what you're told. And so there's a fire ground and a firehouse. And I want to be clear, like, at the firehouse, you have time for the why. At the fire ground, man, hey, let's get it done.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about leading up.
Okay.
And so, like,
very near and dear to my heart. Go ahead.
Oh, well, so it's always been a problem. Like, you'll have somebody, and I experienced it, like that, not a very good leader up top, but like they're a good person, but as far as leadership traits and stuff like that, they just don't have. But you know, I had other guys behind me, but like we needed stuff to do that he wouldn't do, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I was always trying to lead up, and I didn't have any kind of education on leading up. So I always felt like I was meeting, you know, a log in the road. And so what's kind of your advice for that?
The hardest part on you can absolutely lead up, first of all, and go to Jocko and extreme ownership. And man, if you empower your leader, then you will naturally, he will want to take care of you because you make him look good. You know, and I'm not talking about manipulation. Like that's not why he's doing it, but it is why he's doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The more effective you are at your job, the more influence you get inside the organization. The tricky part about leading up versus leading down, when you lead down, you can set expectations, right?
Yeah.
And when you're leading down your subordinates, the people you're responsible for, I like that better than subordinates. The people you're responsible for, you say, here's the expectation. If they don't meet it, then you can say, hey, this is the expectation. You didn't meet it. Here's the consequences, right?
Yeah.
The problem when you're leading up is you can say, hey, here's the expectation I have of you as a leader, right? But the part where it falls apart is when they don't meet the expectation, you don't have the ability to enforce consequences.
Absolutely. I think that there's 2 quotes for this that I absolutely love, and you kind of hit on one of them. One of them says, if you want to lead up, then you have to serve up, right? So serving your officer, making them look good, stuff like that. And then just wanting to do those hard jobs for your officer. And the other one is like, if you're willing to do what others won't, you'll gain influence others don't have. So I kind of relate it to the RIT job on the fire ground, right? If you're looking for someone that wants to do it, no one wants to because we want to be in it, right?
Right on.
And it's one of the hardest jobs if you get called to it, right? I want that job, right? And I think that if we are consistently over time doing those tough things that no one wants to do and doing the things that others are not willing to do, then we will have some more influence, if you will. So that's good.
Have you ever kind of looked into leading up?
Yeah, I mean, everything Chief just said, 100% agree.
It's just I don't know. It's kind of just an out of there factor because something you don't think about all the time. Well, you think of it, but it's more of a I can't even talk right now. In probably a wrong about way of doing it.
Sure.
And so it gets very finicky, and I think it's got to be very intentional too. I mean, just you're not trying to like conform him to like just trying to get you to do what he says and kind of like putting a spell on him, but you want to be intentional that whatever you're doing is for the greater good, whatever.
For me as an officer, I love having an informal leader on my crew because they're taking care of me. Yeah. They're doing stuff that I don't necessarily need to do. And when it comes from them, like driver, Trent, he's my informal leader. He takes care of crap that I don't have to worry about. And he knows when I'm upset, and I don't have to get on the gas. He does that for me.
Yeah.
And it's a lot stronger, I feel like, coming from him. So there's a way to do it, and I love having that informal leadership.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot about timing too, right? Like, I'm gonna pick on my captain a little bit, and you guys get it a little bit. When that dude wakes up, like, don't talk to him. You'll get a grunt out of him until he gets some coffee. Like, let him digest his coffee just a little bit, and then it's okay to approach him. Because if I come at him 100 miles an hour first thing in the morning, the most I'm gonna get, you know, he's a undercover truckee on an engine.
I
So.
want to ask, you guys all same crew or different crews? What's the dynamic? I'm just asking.
Gunner's my firefighter. Velez is a firefighter on a different ship, same station.
Same station, different.
Because just from having the conversation, I feel like you run a very efficient crew, very
I try.
highly effective. You're probably humble too, so
I'm on a
it's part
different
of the-
crew, and I'll say, yeah, he's definitely.
Okay. That's what I'm saying. And he identified, like, when a good leader will identify those informal leaders that are below him that have that influence. And the coolest part is when you identify it and empower it, man, they will take care of so many things on the lower level that keeps it
yeah.
off your plate. Oh,
I have to give him that look, and he knows.
yeah, I'll take care of
And
it.
he says, "Hey, go to the office." And he'll take care of it.
No, and
he does.
I never hear about it.
it comes back to that relationship. And I want to say that about leading up. When you have strong relationships, and again, it's a broken record, but if you have strong relationships with the people above you, then you can be productive. If you don't, then it won't.
Which we're
And
very fortunate because we all hold our own accountability pretty well. Like if we fuck up, we like, hey, we fucked up.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then like a lot of times if you own up to that, you don't have to have them very
And every
hard
time that exists,
conversations.
it is because it is modeled by the leader. Because if
Yes.
it is not modeled by the leader, it will not exist.
Oh, I 100%
Say,
agree.
but leadership is modeled; it's not taught.
Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when it comes to like you read a lot of books, it's known. Like you have this huge list of books. If you were gonna suggest 3 books, just 3 books for an up and coming leader, if you will.
Okay, for leadership.
For leadership.
Okay.
Leadership. What would those books be?
We already talked about Leaders Eat Last. It's my favorite leadership book, bar none. I love the book. It gets nerdy into the science of brain chemistry and the reasons people have developed into the way we are sociologically speaking. Culture Code by Daniel Coyle.
Culture Code.
It is very similar to Leaders Eat Last. They're almost the same book, but they come at it from different angles. The book that changed my life when I was about 27 years old, I read it. It was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh yeah.
It's on the list for sure. Yeah.
And those 3 books, 100% are my top 3 books, probably.
Okay.
And man,
There's a
again,
lot.
man. No, yeah, it's like the 1,000,000-point scale. It's like, how do you rank them up there when they
Right.
get that high?
Was it a military? Was he a military guy? Who's the author of that?
Which one? 7 Habits?
Yeah.
Stephen R. Covey. He may have been military previously, but I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
Either one of y'all want those 3 books? Come get in my locker.
Deal.
Yeah, I'd like to
So-
get into that.
Through all these interviews that you do, the podcasts, all the classes you've gone to, the books, like, how do you absorb all this information?
That's my question.
I have what's called leaky brain.
Okay.
And that's what I'll talk about it in the class. But no, like here's the book I'm reading right now. I read it on the plane today. And I love seeing this, man. That's freaking awesome. This is the book I'm currently reading. So when I read it, I will go through it. And if I see something that I really like, I'll highlight it.
Okay.
Right? And then I take the time after I highlight it, because I have to slow down. And then I put one of these stickers in it, and I'll write down, like this one I wrote, visual and social. Right? I don't know what that's referring to, but I have to write down like 2 or 3 words to encapsulate what that highlight was.
Yep.
And then later on, now I'm so far behind on this, I shouldn't even say it because, but I go and I will take a book and I'll put it on my I have a recipe holder that, that holds the book open, and I'll type up all the highlights in the book. Initially, that's all I did. Then I started putting my own thoughts to the highlights, and it takes forever. And so,
Wow.
But it really does help me lock it in.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
But like I've had Robert Greene's Laws of Human Nature. I've had it on my desk for like 4 months typing up the notes. It's like 26 pages of notes that I've typed on the book. And it's like I'm writing a miniature book of the book. But that's what I do. When I go to conferences, and I was just talking to my son about it today. He's starting at a new station tomorrow, and he was wanting to talk about stuff with the rookies that are at his new station. And I said, hey, and I pulled out, there's like a stack of like legal pads. And I take notes, and I try to match Ramagus in notes. Like no one matches Ramagus.
Oh, gosh.
But I try. And I take notes. Well, then when the class is over, I will go through with the same type of stickers, actually more like this type, and I'll put them on the, like if you take the legal pad and set it sideways, it's almost like a file cabinet. And it'll say like Shannon Stone, Nuggets from the right seat, right there at the front. Then the next one will be like Dave McGrail, high-rise firefighter. Next one will be Kyle Romagus, estimating the stretch. And so I can thumb through those legal pads almost like a file cabinet. And it really works good because Shannon Stone came on the Vigilantes about a month ago, and he was the special guest. And it was really cool because I went to those and I was like, oh, that's when I attended his conference. I was able to flip to those notes, and I was able to ask him questions from his class that were really dialed in. So those are some of my systems. And other than that, everything else is leaky because it really frustrates me to go back and read a book that I read like last year and be like, holy crap, did I read this before? And it drives me crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of opened the door about stuff. I don't know. What were you about to ask?
Go brought up conferences.
Yeah, go for it.
So I know my answer to this, but I know you've been at tons of conferences, classes. What is the most important thing that you get from attending those classes?
I would say the networking, the relationships, the people I have met, the friendships that I've made, the people. It's crazy when someone asks you a question about like ventilation, for instance, and someone says, "Hey, what do you think about this, and this on this ventilation concept? Insert whatever," and you can like say, "Hold on," and you call Nicholas Papa, and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" "Oh no, dude, I would never do that. This is this, and this," and I was like, "Okay, cool." And you have a question on thermal imaging, and you call Andy Starr, like. When you meet these people and have a connection with them, it's just phenomenal.
You got a guy for everything. Kind of staying on that, if you had to pick one class, and now that's going to be very tough, that every single fireman had to go one class, which class would that be?
Again, this is on the 1,000,000-point scale because what do you do? Like the white, like Cruel Intentions with Romagus is like, but I really, when I saw this and I thought about it, I'm like, what is the class I have taken the most? On purpose, like not because I was just at the conference and it's an all day one, no selection. You're just there, and literally, Rob Backer's The Art of Reading Smoke. I've taken it 6 times in the last 2 years, and each time was because I chose to go and take it so I could take more notes.
Right, it's a good class,
dude. It's a phenomenal class. Like I think everybody should have to take it. Like
we went there this past year when he came down to Texas. So it was good.
Was he at the Colony or was it the other one?
Close up there, up in the Metroplex.
That's the first time. Like the first time I caught him was at the Colony, and I was like, "Who's this guy teaching Dotson's class?"
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I'm going there to not bust him, but ask him what he's doing.
It was good. It was good.
So obviously, education's important, right?
Oh yeah,
It's your first L. Learn. Right?
Learn.
Why is education so important within the fire service?
Now that's what I wrote down when you I saw this one, and I was like, "Where's it at?" I was like, "We have to define what do you mean by education." I really wanted to, like, because I know what I mean with learn. It's just.
I mean, because
knowledge of the job, like specific task.
Okay.
Strategies, tactics, even leadership. I mean, that gets into fire service.
Absolutely. Okay. I just want to be clear because like sometimes it's like college studies versus like
No.
Yeah, we don't care about that.
No degrees here.
That's what I wanted to be. But no, I think that
No ifs to.
they're in my backyard, by the way, up there. We have a really good relationship. But no, I think that there's a hierarchy of competence, right? And at the base of I went around the country and teach the 9 Ls, and I wrote the book, and the book came out and it's great, and I'm a firm believer in it. But I had an epiphany, one of my shower thoughts, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what if a clown, like literally a clown, came along and wanted to teach the 9 Ls? Like when I say a clown, I'm not talking about jokester. I mean someone who's incompetent at the job.
Phony.
Yeah, can't pull a pre-connect. And they're going to implement the 9 Ls and make a high performance culture. Would that work? And I was sitting there going, holy crap, there's a layer underneath the 9 Ls, right?
Yeah.
And that's what started me down this road of the hierarchy of competence. And so I realized that at the base of the pyramid, at first I thought it was competence. Like you have to be good at the job. And then I realized there's something under it, but that's another rabbit hole. But if you're not good at the job, nothing else matters. Like it's like food and shelter. Mm-hmm. Or food and water on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got to have food and water before you worry about shelter. You'll give up safety to go get food and water, and so you have to have competence.
I'm curious what's under it.
Humility.
Oh, okay.
Because and this is the base bedrock. Sorry, I'm whacking this microphone. Mm-hmm. The bedrock of the hierarchy of competence is humility. Because if you can be humble, then you can grow.
Oh, absolutely.
If you lack humility, then you will never be able to grow.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
And so,
You kind of brought up Romagus, and I know like someone somewhere shared with me the Holy Grail, right? The bro drive. It was, for a person like me, it was very overwhelming. So when, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg, right? We live in this world with so much out there. Like, as a new person, if you were starting out on this journey, like, where would you begin? Is there a specific place you would go? Articles, books, or
and like brand new knows nothing, or
let's just say
what level are we talking about? 'Cause
Okay.
there's levels to this game.
I kind of want to know personally. So like, say 2 to 5 years, 2 to 5 years on the job. You have a good understanding of the job. You've been to a few fires, stuff like that.
Man, it's hard to argue with the Book of Andy.
Oh yeah.
The articles from the Book of Andy, because you get so much foundational philosophy behind little drops of water, etc. FDIC keynotes, Mike Walker's Fireman Standard, Ray McCormick's Culture of Extinguishment, and Andy Frederick's Don't Worry About That Nozzle Kid.
Yeah.
Those are bite-sized chunks. In the Bro Drive, the Journeyman Firefighter. That's a PDF. I printed it off and I give it out to people. But man, that's such a multifaceted question.
Yeah.
And I go back to
agree with
Cap
Yeah.
and his motivation. Like when you have a kid that's motivated, man, I don't care what it is. Just keep it going. Just feed them.
I know, like, I'm on a crew that lucky enough to be a part of a bunch of new hire training and stuff like that. And with these rookies, especially when they're just going to be riding an engine for a while, I'll tell them, like, if you haven't read this book, I'm going to share it with you. So Google Drive, Book of Andy, here you go. Because something that was written, in the fire service, that so much has changed.
Yeah.
It's crazy to have a book that is still so applicable to what we do.
Like the first half of that, man, holy smokes, man.
When it was shared with me, I was just like, everything is making sense now, and it's a phenomenon.
And he wrote that at a time, like the time when he wrote.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he wrote it last year.
Yeah,
It's just
that's awesome.
giant.
So I don't know, y'all want anything else on that?
Yeah, I'm good.
I think we really wanted to talk to you about like your podcast.
Okay.
Because I know I could speak from personal experience when I came from a smaller department that you pretty much described to a T, right? The goal of the day was to get to the recliner
Yes.
as fast as you could, and if you could get out to the slowest station,
You won.
That's winning. And so when I came here, I don't remember who specifically, but they mentioned the scrap, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. And I can personally say that because of the scrap, I've learned what all these conferences are. All these different people that now I'm following on social media and getting all this good information from. What was the drive behind, first of all, just starting not just Firehouse Vigilance, but the scrap?
Initially, Firehouse. I'll start with Firehouse Vigilance because that was the initial thing, and I made my memes and my little pictures and things like that, and edited my photos. And really, it was just kind of my outlet. It was my outlet to put out these thoughts, especially in my own department where it was not the norm. Right. And that's not to downplay my department. I'm never bussing my department. It's just the way it was. It's reality.
Right.
And there's a lot of departments that are that way. And it's not bad. It's just the way it is. And so, and initially at Firehouse Vigilance, I got hacked by some, I want to say Russian hackers, but I don't know. I don't know who it was. But the original Firehouse Vigilance got attacked, and I lost a lot of articles because I would reach out to people and, like, someone I found, on somewhere and say, hey, would you like to write an article? I really like that Facebook post you made. Do you mind if I publish it as a blog post? And that was initially a lot of it. But I kind of got into blogs when blogs were dying.
Yeah.
And there was just no traction to it and stuff like that. I really loved Mark Von Oppen and his blog posts, and I wanted to be that guy, kind of sort of thing. I just had this message I wanted to share. And it was actually my wife who said, she's a real estate agent. She knew all these real estate agents that would go live in their houses and show a tour. And she said, you should just do a Facebook Live. And I was like, yeah, you're dumb. Please, whatever.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. But eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I did. And if you find those first 10, the only place I think you can find them is YouTube.
Yeah.
And they're terrible. Like, it's me and my phone talking about the content is good, but I did like 10 of them. And I went to my Fools meeting, the monthly Fools meeting, and my Fools president said, hey, I really like your scraps. I want to be a guest. And I was like, for real? You want to be a guest?
So was it called Scraps?
It was
initially?
a weekly scrap.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
So you already named it.
Originally, yeah.
Okay.
It was the Weekly Scrap with Corley Moore, and it was called the Weekly Scrap because it was just the leftovers. That's kind of, that was the original.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's how much
cool.
thought process went behind it. But he said, and I was like, really? You'd want to be a guest? And is Court Smith, he was the training coordinator, he was at Oklahoma City Fire in the training division. And he came on and talked about how they use fear, pain, and I forget the three. So sorry, Court. But fear, pain, pride to build up the recruits when they brought them in. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about instilling initially a fear, like what the hell's going on, moving to physical just exhaustion, and then building up that pride in them. And so, and he talked about it in the first scrap. It's number 11. It's like literally 13 minutes long. Like that's it.
Yeah.
But I had that first one, and I was like, holy crap, this is way better than anything I've ever done. And I loved it. And then from there, I think the next week, I don't remember the original guest. Like there was a few people I reached out to. I got sent to Houston to go to Honeywell for a 4-gas education. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn how to work on 4 gases, and I didn't want to go. And I was stuck in the hotel room that evening, and I was literally on my computer, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask, and I insert whoever, like somebody that was like way outside of my league and I said, I'm going to ask him to be a guest. And I just started firing off Facebook messages. I fired off like 20 that night.
That's
and then like the next week I had like 10 of them say, yeah, I'll do it.
That's wild.
I don't know the dynamics of Moore. Is it a relatively small town? Or?
We are suburbia.
Okay. It's like my wife's from Oklahoma, but she's from like straight up eastern Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And I said I was from a small town, and she took me there, and I was like, yeah, I was just kidding.
Small. My wife's from southeast Oklahoma.
Okay. I don't know if my wife would appreciate me saying what town she's from.
My wife is from Poto. Actually, Poto.
My wife is from Poto.
Okay.
She's just north of Poto.
I will say this. Poto was the big town
Okay.
close to where my wife came from.
Okay, then I'm going to say she's from Panama.
No, my wife actually went to like Panama.
No
like
kidding.
Middle
That's crazy.
school or something.
That's wild.
Hodgins and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I'm curious to know what's next for your brand and the influence you're trying to make. So you plan on writing any more books? Or
Books are host. Like I got to explain things to people. It's like I'm a. One of the reasons I think the podcast is so successful is because I'm an introvert, and I'm a introverted people person, if that makes sense. Like I love people, but I'm highly introverted. So like doing stuff and interacting wears me out. When I finish teaching for a day, I'm exhausted. And then we go to a social, and by the end of it, I'm like a zombie. So, but what really works for me well is when I have a guest on, like I can let the guest talk for like 20 minutes at a time, and I don't have to talk, and it really works out good. But next, podcasting was never my passion. Getting my message out was my passion. I love writing. Like I really do. And I'm working on, I think, 3 books right now.
Wow.
And I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. One's a relationship book written with my wife, and it's going to be good. It's kind of the foundation for Broken Tools, which is our marriage class that we're teaching. And then Codex Vigilance, which is, I don't want to say, it's like based off Marcus Aurelius' meditations, but it's life philosophy on the quest for self-mastery. And it's there's a whole lot that flows into it. And then the last one I'm working on is called Stopping Toxicity, and it's just living in the question you guys asked earlier. What do you do if you're in a toxic environment? Yeah. And how do you stop toxic? So I'm constantly writing on those. Now, I've spent like the last 3 or 4 months trying to get the Audible version of the 9 L's done, and it's just like I want to work on. Anyways.
Yeah.
So what's like some goals that you set yourself as far as with your brand? And career goals. I'm curious to know that as well.
Well, like in the fire department, I feel like I'm where I want to be.
Okay.
I'm as high as you can go and still be on shift. I love being on shift. I love shift work. I will never work 9 to 5. I say that all the time. But so I've met my fire department career goals. I love it, and awesome. I run a crew, and I'm able to implement my philosophies that are in the books and the things that I sometimes screw up and things I get right. But I get to reap the rewards for it. So that part of it is like a very fulfilling part of it. And we had an officers meeting with all green shift, C shift, whatever you want to call it. We call it green, but it's C shift. And we had an officers meeting where all of us got together, and it was just really invigorating to get the feedback that I got from them. So on that side of things, it's awesome. As far as Firehouse Vigilance goes, I love teaching. I'm building the class like here. I'll show you guys this. These are my brain thoughts. Not to bore you with this stuff.
That's impressive.
But this is what I was trying to work on as we were flying and stuff today, but it's all about confrontations, expectations, And I think this is really needed in the fire service. But this is a class I'm building that I think is going to be better than 9Ls. And I'm also working on the class, the hierarchy of competence, which I kind of talked about a little bit. And but yeah, there's just not enough time in the day to get it done.
That's all.
It's
It's a
just
lot.
like my brain dump.
So when it comes back to the scrap, and it's obviously pretty huge, and I know like I like to tune into it whenever I can, live. I thought that was super interesting. We actually talked about this before the show. Like it's pretty unique in a sense of the audience interaction, the Facebook Live ordeal. Was there like a certain moment or person that really like made the scrap what it is today, if that makes sense, where it started gaining traction and more people? Was there a certain guest you had on or?
I think, not doing a study or anything like that, but what I feel like the number one thing that made the scrap successful was COVID.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. Like when FDIC got canceled and Firehouse got canceled and everything got canceled was right when I was starting the scrap. And so when I did send out those 20 emails or Facebook messages on that night, everybody had just received news within the last few months that they had the year off.
Right.
And they're like, I'll be on your dumb unknown podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Why I like the scrap so much, it's because it's like a one source all. Like I don't have to go through searching Spotify all day looking for 10 different topics. Like the scrap is so diverse into leadership and going into tactics and strategies as well as skill level things. And I think that's a very good business model that you kind of done that, because I mean, there's a crap ton of podcasts out there, but with yours, like you have a lot of episodes and they're all vetted.
Yeah.
All vetted individuals. And
And guys like
awesome.
us can participate in that. Like, we can ask a question and maybe it gets asked to whoever, insert big name. I
love it.
awesome.
I love it when there's good. I think great questions from whoever's asking, and half the times I don't even know. Sometimes I recognize the name, but great questions, man, make the podcast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had over 100 guests, right?
Oh yeah.
Put you on the spot.
I don't think I can answer it. I really don't.
come on.
I've thought about it. No, because there's different reasons for loving people. Me and Chris were talking about it at dinner tonight. It's like when Rick Lasky said yes. You know what I'm saying? I was like, holy crap, you really?
Yeah.
Because he was like number 33. So that's like the 23rd guest.
Chief Gordon's my favorite one so far.
Clyde, amazing. But there's different, like every time I have Ike on is a super big deal. He's been on 3 times. And I love Ike, and his passion and everything like that. But then you got number 75, the Romagus episode, the whiteboard episode. How do you discount that?
Yeah.
And then, like, we were talking about Shane Bentley. When I didn't know who Shane Bentley was, right? I just knew that there was this guy who put out this oath, and I saw it on Facebook. So I reached out to him and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this on a scrap. And then I talked to him on the phone. And if you know Shane Bentley, he has a deep Georgia drawl. You know what I'm saying? I was like, do I want to have this guy on? And dude, it was one of the best scraps of all time as far as passion.
I agree.
And so it's some of my favorites are the surprises because I don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
And then some of my favorites are the Ikes because I know exactly what's coming and they deliver. And then some of them are because of the technical expertise. So it's just
Yeah.
it's like picking a favorite movie. Do you mean action movie? Do you mean Christmas movie? Do you mean sports movie?
And sorry, cut you off.
No. I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing we want to talk about, and Velez brought this up, is the Creed.
Yeah.
Very impressive. And so how did that come about?
Honestly, man, that was me trying to put into words what the job meant to me when I was kind of going through this formative stage of what does this job mean to me? And I really melted it down to those 4 sentences. And then those 4 sentences built into the actual full-length Creed. But we do this for others. This is if I rewrote it, we do this for them because for them came around after I wrote the Creed. Yeah. But we do this for others. Push, train, learn. But that's the whole thing of it's not about us. And when I say others, it's not about just the citizen. It's about my family back home. Like I'm plugged into this job because that gives me the best chance of going back home to my kids.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
I'm plugged into this job because that's the best chance that I can take care of you if you go down or if I go down and you're plugged in. So when we say others, it's everything.
Yeah.
And
I think it's home because my whole family lives in Longview,
Right on.
born and raised, right? My dad had cardiac arrest, and my crew was the first one responding to him. This is years and years and years ago, but they were plugged in the job. They knew what to do. Man, we got it back just like that. And so for me, that's a big part of why I do what I do, is because I know these people that live in this town. My family lives in here, so there's a very good chance y'all might run on them.
Yes.
So you better be performing up to par, or I'm gonna be pissed.
And it's
Yeah.
strong. It's strong, man.
Yeah.
Master ourselves, never easy, never quit. Man, and because it really is about mastering yourself. It's about staring in the mirror and saying, what do I need to fix? And then fixing it.
Right.
Because a lot of people talk.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think, like, when I read this, besides, like, the personal reflection that had happened, like, to me, right? Like, these are all great points, and I'd like to think that my mindset is where this entire thing is written towards, but I kind of went down a rabbit hole of thinking, like, what would this do to the guy that's not plugged in?
Right.
Because I have the true belief that regardless of how grumpy and unplugged you are and how much it seems like you just hate every aspect of your life, at some point, way down deep in there, like, you made the choice to
Right.
be a fireman. Everyone wants to be a fireman.
Yes.
Like, no one forced you to do this job. And so, like, those people, I think, would benefit the most from this. And it sucks that they might not ever read it. But those are the kind of people I was like, wow, they would benefit extremely from this, you know?
Especially the ones that maybe joined for the wrong intentions, but later on developed, the passion.
That
or whatever
connection.
for it. Yeah, that
Or
connection
even the
to
people that joined for the right reasons, for whatever reason, became disgruntled.
And lost
Yeah.
their way.
Right,
Yeah.
you know? And I think every now and then we have to give them a little nudge to go back and forth. I know, like you said, those guys that are unplugged, it's a little scary when you have people that are a little bit older than you in the job, and, you're in the bay doing mask-up drills or whatever, and they're kind of like, what Kool-Aid you drinking, man? And
Right.
That's scary to me.
And all of that, man, well, I say. But that comes from their insecurity
Right.
of being exposed that they're not good at it.
Yeah.
And we know this. But no, and a big part of the creed, is I wanted to be very clear, is it's the journey, man. This is not a creed of the elite. This
Right.
is not for the guys who are the top 2%, although that is who is attracted to it. But it's for those who want to be.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's not about being there, it's about the journey to get there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be very clear on that. It's because you may be at a physical point where you have let yourself go to where you're a liability to your crew.
Absolutely.
But are you willing to do something about it?
And I know, like I said, I broke this down pretty analytically, and every single part of it was just like, it was shooting thoughts in my head. And, the part where he's like, there's a minimum standard for the job. And we talked about standards and how the fire service lacks in that standard. And the video that pops in my head when I hear the word standard for whatever reason is Basil's viral video, like, that got me fired up. He's like,
Yes.
his crew is going to hold the standard,
Yes.
right? And I know, like I said, speaking for myself, and I know I can worked enough with their crew, like, we have a standard on our crew, and we're going to hold you to that standard. So if you're traveling into our station that day, like, get ready to work,
Right on.
because we're going to hold you there. And just the training, the learning, everything, like, you're going to participate, and we're going to hold you accountable just as much as we would if you were the normal person in that seat.
Well, with your crew's culture, our crew's culture is to go way and above and beyond the standard, and we're so competitive,
Right.
Like, in
Yeah.
everything we do. I smoked him racing the other day.
Don't
Was running.
lie. Got you about 15 years and I
But we're just competitive, and we're competitive against y'all because we just
Yep.
want to be good,
Right.
And so, and I think that's what a lot of that was just translating to, is not maybe between crews, but to yourself,
Yeah.
But
No, a rising tide, man. And I love rising tide raises all ships. When one company officer takes over a crew and then enables them to be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And he's responsible for them, and he allows them to be awesome. It raises those nearby crews incrementally.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it only takes a little bit, but you can shift. You'll blink and, like, 5 years later look back and say, "Holy shit, how far did we come in raising the standard in this department?"
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
especially
awesome.
like, and do you feel like the new generation is more susceptible to that, or you think they're, I guess, more better lack of words, like adaptive, or you think they're more rejected to it?
I think that human beings, irregardless of generation, want to be awesome.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think that leadership controls the lever, the on-off switch. Like, and like I said, I'm not trying to get in the weeds, but everybody has so much bandwidth some people are born with great gifts, right? Like physically gifted. LeBron James.
Yeah.
How gifted was that guy just genetically, right? Physically speaking. And there's some people that are like communicators but they have just a wide bandwidth of ability, right?
Yeah.
And then right here in the middle of all that ability is like the true neutral. And so they can either be a force for good or a force for toxicity, right?
Yeah.
Depending on, and leadership determines. So you can have one of the most badass people on the planet, and if they have bad leadership, then they drift towards failure. But their gifts don't change. And when they're on this end, they are destructive. And they cause so much damage inside of an organization. But when they're under good leadership, and I really do take it back to the leadership, then they can be such a force for good.
Absolutely.
And it's like leaders, if you really melt it down, leaders just enable people to be the best version of themselves. And then people who don't understand that they are responsible for everybody beneath them, because I don't want to call them leaders, I want to call them bosses, bad managers, whatever, they bring out the worst in those people. And those people's gifts are still there. They bring out the worst in it.
So you say people are born with gifts.
Yes.
I truly believe some people are just born leaders. It just comes natural for them. Do you feel like there's born leaders, or is that something that can be taught?
I think, irregardless, I absolutely think that nature versus nurture, it's a great debate. But no, absolutely taught, because it really is relationships.
Yeah.
And it's like saying like a marriage, right? A good marriage. Are you born so you're going to have a good marriage, or do you because a marriage is a relationship. Right. And
Takes
so
work.
Yeah. But I do believe like God put people on here, not to get too preachy, to lead people.
Man, again, I'm not arguing with you at all. I'm
Yeah.
a preacher's kid. I think that things happen when you're a kid, and again, not to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
But like you go to your first birthday party and something happens, so you go down this path, right? Like some sort of rejection, or you said something smart, so you become the class clown, and then later on something else happens. And these forks, if you actually picture them, like just millions of forks, and it only takes like 3, and you're heading this direction. At age 6 or 3, and you're heading in this direction at age 6. And that's what I wonder. And I sit there and lay awake at night going, holy shit, if this would have happened to that person, like how do you ever get back over there? So when I say nature versus nurture, yes, everybody can do it, but everybody's upbringing and choices and
Through influences through life.
I get some nerdy, deep thoughts, sorry.
That's some good stuff.
Well, Chief Moore, we don't want to take up any more of your time.
Hey, I got one more.
Hit it. I like it.
So tell me about the next five questions.
Okay. You're talking about the next?
No.
Okay.
Are you figuring out some new ones?
Man, we got, I think there has to be at some point.
Yeah.
Because all the low-hanging fruit gets taken.
Right. So I kind of want to know your answers to the next 5 questions.
Okay.
I can't remember them all. I can remember some of them.
I'm trying to remember the next 5 questions.
So what one trait makes you that go-to badass firefighter?
Man, it's hard to argue with your motivation. I would say passion. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've always said, man, and one of my memes that I made, I don't know whose quote it is, so I'm sorry, but hire for passion and intensity, I can teach you everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've been challenged on that. Don't get me wrong. I've been challenged on that, like by people who we've hired who are passionate and intense but can't learn. And, God. But no, I would say passion.
Okay.
Like if you care, then it'll translate to everything else. If it comes from within.
Right. So
which is something I lacked when I hired on.
So I think that's one of the next ones is what one piece of advice would you give firefighter rookie Corley Moore?
Yeah.
I figured you'd have these answered. Like,
I know.
Hey,
I've never been asked these 5. I've been asked the original 5. I've never been asked these 5. I've never thought about it before. Man, I would tell them if you don't love this, if you're not having a good time doing this job, you are doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. Because I think that encapsulates so much about what this job is about.
Yeah. Good answer.
I gave it to my son the other day because that's why it's kind of fresh in my head. Yes.
Max.
Yeah. I get to decide the points, so yes.
Yeah. What one mistake have you learned from?
Easy answer for me is that when I complained to my crew when I was a lieutenant, when I was a driver, in my department, I complained about the captain to my crew every night, and I turned that station into a toxic cesspool. So it's easy. I mean, I wish I could be more profound than that, but that is it.
Max
period.
points. Max points.
Max points.
Okay.
Yeah, don't complain down.
What's number 4 question?
I don't
know number 5.
I fixate
Yeah,
on
my
number
phone
5.
died.
I'm not gonna lie.
Holy crap! I only ask them like once a week. What is number 4?
That's number 5.
That's the last one.
What's 4? Make up a 4.
I can pull up and drive. Hold on, we can edit this, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Pull it up. I'm ready.
This is the. You gotta host a podcast or something. Because I didn't ask Ben. He was like, "What do I?" When I hung up the phone, he's like, "I thought I was going to get to do the 5 questions." I'm like, yeah. What mistake have you learned the most from in your fire service career is number 4. Favorite training drill, number 3.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. Favorite
All right.
training drill. Man, I really do love flowing water. Anything where I can flow. I mean, honestly, like, and it's because almost the physical workout I get now as a chief is better because I don't get to do it as often. And so I would say anything where I can like just slap a Camilla on it and like advance across.
So, throughout your career, are you an engine guy? Did you spend any time on a truck?
I work in suburbia, so I'll qualify it by saying all we have is engines and trenchins.
Trenchant.
And so we
I like that.
We jump from depending on where the call drops, we jump off the engine onto the truck and take it.
Oh, okay.
And it's still a Quint, even though we call it a truck. But it is what it is. We don't have a truck culture there. Now we're working on it with the whole we're going to put a new unit into service at Station 2, and it's going to be a actual true truck company.
Nice.
With true truck duty. So we're working on it.
Nice. Well, that leads into the last question. Heavy fire searchable space.
1,000%, I will take the VES every time. There's no question about it in my head. Now, that being said, I like to qualify this because one time on Twitter, like I don't even know how long ago it was, like 2 years ago, somebody posted and said, "Hey, check this picture out." And it's like a picture of this just rock and rolling residential, and they were like, fifth question, VES or first in on? I was like, holy crap, that one really, I might want the knob on this one. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just getting it, and it's like, so, but 100%, the whole reason, I have never made a grab that survived, like in my career. It's 26 years as of February 3rd, so I'm getting close. I've made grabs, but no one that's ever made it. And so that's why we're here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Exactly.
Velez, he don't believe in VES.
No,
Do
he
not
doesn't.
bring that up. It's a lie.
We're gonna.
I got to hear the story.
No, there is
We can't
no
air it.
story. I believe in VES. It's just an
I
ongoing
just make up
thing.
shit.
Okay.
I just
He
make
believes on
it's the-
searching off the lines.
It's the whole first due, right? Fire attack versus search. And I've
Are we going to get a corn harvester in here? or something?
Oh,
don't bring it
I'm
up.
done.
Don't bring it up. Yeah, and
You heard that? You heard that the corn story?
Yes,
Is that what you're talking about?
absolutely he has. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think on Manny's podcast, I actually wanted to do that one first. I typed on there, it's like corn harvester analogy now.
I thought
Hey,
you,
this is what I teach my battalion. I tell them, if you are first in, man, get water on the fire. That is the main priority if you roll in. Now, your job as a company officer is to determine if you need to diverge from that in any way, shape, or form. And that takes into account time of day, what you're seeing, every bit of visual and auditory and stimuli that you are taking in. If there's something that changes your mind on that, then you have to make the call and make it fast,
Yeah.
right? But ultimately, water on the fire is going to give everybody inside of that structure the best chance at survival. Now, things can change that.
Yeah.
And I talk about that in Reflexive Readiness.
This
tomorrow.
goes
So,
But
back.
you got to take into place your department too and your capabilities.
absolutely.
So for me, I'm always VESing because there's going to be an engine behind a second due, a 1 minute at most.
most.
So for me, I'm going in.
It's just goes back to the conversation I said. I'm a
And
very
I'll back you 100% as your battalion chief. You make
My man.
Yeah.
It goes back to me being a black and white person and there not being a answer. Right? There is an answer, but it's a dynamic
And I'll
answer,
tell you this: on
and
a
it's
fireground,
evolving.
with a rock and rolling residential structure fire, and you're rolling up 2 a.m. in the morning, the black and white answer is be decisive.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be decisive. Make a decision, and I'll back you up. Stand in the front yard and think about it, and we're gonna have a long conversation.
That's good.
all right.
Well, guys, I don't have anything else. Do you?
No,
Velez,
we're good.
Cap?
We're good.
Dude, I had a blast. I hope
This
you
is
guys
fun.
enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, guys, thank y'all for watching the TBM podcast with Chief Moore. we'll be having a convention tomorrow. He's going to be teaching and talking and socialing after. So we're going to have a great time and stuff like that. But don't forget to follow us, like us, share us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, the whole nine. And the apparel's coming. The apparel is literally being printed right now. And so it's about to come out. Thank you, guys. Cool.
Thank you.
Sick.
Boom. Good stuff.
TBM looking good.
Are we trying?